Welcome to this video on the scientific method. Are you curious about how scientists learn about the world around us? Do you want to understand how they come up with new discoveries and theories? Then this video is for you. The scientific method is a systematic way of finding answers to questions and solving problems. It's a way of thinking that's objective, logical, and focused on evidence. Here are the steps of the scientific method. Observation. Scientists observe something in the natural world. They might notice a pattern, or something that seems unusual. Question. Scientists form a question about what they observed. Hypothesis. Scientists come up with a hypothesis, or a tentative explanation for what they observed. A hypothesis is an educated guess based on their observations and existing knowledge. Experiment. Scientists gather evidence to test their hypothesis through experiments, which are carefully designed to provide data that can support or refute their hypothesis. Conclusion. Scientists analyze the data from their experiments to see if it supports or refutes their hypothesis. If it supports their hypothesis, it's a good starting point for further research. If it doesn't support their hypothesis, they might need to revise it or come up with a new one. Peer review. After scientists have collected and analyzed data from their experiments, they often write a paper describing their findings and how they support or refute their hypothesis. This paper is then submitted to a scientific journal for review. The review process, known as peer review, involves other scientists in the same field reviewing the paper to assess its quality and accuracy. If the paper is deemed to be scientifically sound and of sufficient quality, it will be published in the journal. Here are some examples to illustrate the scientific method. Example 1. A scientist observes that plants in a certain area always seem to grow taller when they're exposed to more sunlight. They form the question: does more sunlight lead to taller plant growth? Their hypothesis is, plants that receive more sunlight will grow taller than those that receive less sunlight. They conduct an experiment in which they expose some plants to more sunlight and others to less sunlight and measure the height of each plant after a certain period of time. If the data from the experiment supports their hypothesis, it's a good starting point for further research. If the data doesn't support their hypothesis, they might need to revise it or come up with a new one. Example 2. A different scientist observes that people who eat a lot of fatty foods seem to have a higher risk of heart disease. They form the question: is there a relationship between diet and heart disease? Their hypothesis is, eating a diet high in fatty foods is associated with an increased risk of heart disease. They conduct a study in which they track the diets and health outcomes of a large group of people over time. If the data supports their hypothesis, it could be a valuable finding. If the data doesn't support it, they might need to revisit their hypothesis or come up with a new one. It's important to remember that the scientific method is a process of continuous learning and improvement. Scientists are always building on what they already know, and they're always open to new ideas and new evidence. But it's also worth noting that the scientific method isn't perfect. Scientists are human, and they can make mistakes. That's why it's important to be cautious and critical when evaluating new discoveries. And finally, it's worth noting that the scientific method is always evolving. As new technologies and techniques are developed, scientists are able to explore new questions and make new discoveries. So even though we know a lot about the world today, there's always more to learn. Thanks for watching. We hope you now have a better understanding of the scientific method and its role in advancing our understanding of the world. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our future videos. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next one.